Hello, classic rock fans. I'm reporting just a couple of days after seeing Gene Simmons from Kiss live at Summerfest on the 3rd of July here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is the first time I've seen a Gene Simmons solo concert. I've seen him perform with Kiss on their farewell tour. And earlier this year, I went out to Los Angeles to see the Bon Scott tribute concert that was put on by comedian Dean Del Rey, and Gene Simmons was a special guest at that show. And if you saw my review of that show, you might remember that I described Gene's appearance in that concert as perhaps the highlight of the whole show. So after seeing that concert in February, a few weeks later, it was announced that Gene Simmons was going to be playing Summerfest here in Milwaukee, and I made a point to go see this show. Unfortunately, I can't be 100% positive about this concert. Right off the bat, I'll tell you it was a mixed bag. And I'll start with one low point, the weather. The weather for Gene's set was unfortunate. We didn't have great weather for the 4th of July weekend, and he was the headliner at the Uline warehouse on Friday, July 3rd, and he started at about 9:30 p.m. Well, about a half hour into his set, it started to rain. Not heavily, not heavy rain, but it did start to drizzle, and the forecast was that it was going to rain for the rest of the night. This absolutely disrupted the concert a little bit as far as the audience goes. A sizable percentage of the large crowd that showed up for him ducked out early. And I'm going to admit this right here at the start. I was one of those people. Let's go through the set list. He started off with Deuce and Shout It Out Loud. Deuce was the song he played at that Bon Scott tribute concert in Los Angeles. So I was really happy that he opened his set with this song because I thought it was awesome when he played it in LA, and he was really good playing it here. And after that was Shout It Out Loud, one of my favorite Kiss songs. So we were off to a really strong start. And I would say that was the peak of the concert for me because I like both of those songs, and it just kicked off the show with some really good energy. After that were a couple of songs that I'll admit I was not familiar with. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with those songs because I'm not the world's biggest Kiss fan, despite the shirt. I have some of the records. I like plenty of their songs, but compared to the world of like diehard Kiss fans, I'm not in that league. And I'm certainly not going to pretend I'm in that league. So please keep in mind that this is just the perspective of a casual Kiss classic rock fan. So at some point in the set when he was doing those three songs, I Let Me Go Rock and Roll and Parasite, he made some remarks to the crowd. And he made some remarks about the 4th of July. Specifically because he was scheduled to fly out to Washington, D.C. to record some narration for a veterans event in D.C. for World War II vets. Well, that's awesome. And it was interesting to hear about what he was going to be doing with that. Unfortunately, the remarks he made were not particularly positive because he made a speech about patriotism and about how America is the best country in the world. But it was also in that classic Gene style of stirring up shit just to get some press. Here's a few clips of what he said.
This is the greatest country. That's why we've had anywhere from 20 million to 30 million illegal immigrants. Why? Because they are willing to break the law and come into the greatest country on the face of the planet, right here. I myself am an immigrant, but a legal one. I came through the lawful way. You wait in line, you respect the country, respect its laws, and then you become a citizen of the United States of America. And if you don't like America, please go back to where you fucking came from.
Now, I'm sure some of you watching are like, hell yeah, Gene, right on. I'm with you. And that's fine. As far as my perspective goes, I don't really subscribe to the whole love it or leave it thing. I don't think that's really productive because I think the intention of those remarks is to basically just stifle conversation. And I don't see any value in that. But already were getting too deep into the weeds and totally missing the point. The point of those remarks was to rile up the crowd and perhaps to get some social media coverage that would maybe get him some pats on the back when he would be out in DC doing this veterans narration thing that he was invited to do by the president. Personally speaking, I don't celebrate my patriotism by yelling at other people. So that message doesn't do a whole lot for me. But at the same time, that doesn't matter a whole lot. He was playing to the crowd. He was trying to rile them up. And he did. People did respond with cheers and fists in the air and all that. So it is what it is. And he got the coverage he wanted. That said, it was around this middle part of the show where the rain started and the crowd started to dissipate a little bit. And if I'm honest, I'm sure his remarks were enough for some people to roll their eyes and go over to one of the other shows. Specifically, I know Flo Rida and Reverend Run from Run DMC drew huge crowds that night, so I imagine there were some more casual music people who were there to watch him for a few minutes, and they ducked out to go to one of those shows because those stages were packed. Okay, getting back to the set list. After Parasite, he played Cold Gin, which kind of brought me back into the show because Cold Gin is one of my favorite Kiss songs. I saw Chris Jericho and his Kiss cover band Quarantine play that last year, and I thought that was really cool. So hearing Gene and the band play that was another highlight for me. I do love that song. And he followed it up with another song that I like called I Love It Loud. Now, it was during this song that there was a very positive aspect of the show. Gene brought a younger fan up on stage to sing I Love It Loud with him. She was in full demon face paint, came up on stage. They talked back and forth a little bit. It was a little flirty, but that's entertaining for the crowd. It was mostly just very charming. And it was cool that Gene was giving this fan an experience that she'll remember for the rest of her life, you know, getting to be on stage with one of her musical heroes and singing in one of Kiss's best songs. So that was definitely a positive. And I think the crowd really enjoyed that. So I'll give credit to Gene for that aspect of the show. And that wasn't the only fan he brought on stage either. I know for the last song of the night, he brought like a little kid up on stage to sing along on Rock and Roll All Night. I didn't see that personally because I had left by that point. But yeah, a lot of fan involvement for Gene in this show. And I think that was a positive. Although I will say maybe bringing the little kid up on stage for Rock and Roll All Night was a little much, but I guess that's all personal taste. Now, it was after this song that I noticed that the crowd was really starting to dissipate. You can see some pictures on Facebook, but again, I don't know if that was because of the weather and the rain, or because there were some more popular artists playing at the same time, or if a lot of the people that came to see Gene never intended to stay all that long in the first place. Summerfest is very fluid like that. You'll have a stage that starts with a huge crowd, and that crowd will clear out as the set goes on. Quality of the performance, totally irrelevant, just the nature of what people are planning to do that day. Or you'll have a circumstance where a band starts off playing to almost nobody, but over the course of the show, a huge crowd will amass. That happened to Wang Chung in 2010, and in my interview with Jack Hughes from Wang Chung, he talked about how that happened to them at Summerfest and how great that felt.
It's one of my favorite gigs ever. We're playing in a kind of tented area, you know, and there were maybe sort of 300 people sitting around, you know, pretty casual. But as we played a sort of half-hour set or whatever it was, 40 minutes, the place gradually filled up. And by the end, there were people I could see standing outside, and, you know, there was a whole vibe.
So hopefully for Gene's sake, given that he was on the flip side of this experience, hopefully that wasn't too negative for him. But in any case, it was also around this time of the set where I started to think maybe I'm not going to stay for the whole show. And I gave him 3 more songs to win me over, and none of them really did it for me. The 3 songs after I Love It Loud were Are You Ready, Domino, and Spit. 3 more songs I'm not familiar with. 3 more songs that didn't do a whole lot for me. And after Spit, that's when the solos were starting. And I'll be honest, that is typically not a highlight of a concert for me. So that's when my buddy and I decided to clear out and just beat the crowd back to my car. Now, the songs I missed were Rocket Ride, Charisma, Calling Dr. Love, Christine 16, and Rock and Roll All Night. And of those 5 songs, I guess I would have liked to see Calling Dr. Love and Rock and Roll All Night, but I'll live without seeing them. So, although I assume his performance on all those songs was just fine. For the Kiss fans that stuck around, I bet they enjoyed it. The main reasons that made me decide to call it early were the weather was not great, and most of the songs he was playing weren't getting over for me. There were a few highlights, absolutely, but the songs I didn't know weren't doing much for me. And it's not to say I really dislike those songs. I guess I could give them a chance by listening to the studio versions, and maybe it would be worth giving Gene another shot. If he came back to town, I do think I would see him again. So yeah, I know this is kind of lame on my part. Normally, I like to stick it out and get a full review. But there's also this thing about seeing live music that if you're watching a band and it clicks in your head that you're not really having a great time, the best move might be to just say, you know what, this isn't the night for me, and duck out. I don't know if I'll get another chance to see Gene Simmons again, but if I do, I think I would take it. I think I would give him another shot because this might have been an off night. Maybe I didn't like being caught off guard by the rain. Maybe I didn't really dig what he was saying with his speech. Maybe I thought he was wasting too much time talking between songs. Because I'll tell you, that was another thing. He's getting all the press for his 4th of July comments, but realistically, what was dragging the show down the most for me, now that I think about it, was he had ridiculously long gaps between each of these songs. It was like he was vamping up there, you know. I don't know if that was a strategy so he could catch his breath. He certainly had to wipe his face about 100 times in between each song. So that was just another negative aspect of the show, that it felt like he was burning clock up there. Although he played 16 songs, so it was a full show, I don't know. The breaks just kind of dragged things down. And the things he said, again, setting aside the 4th of July stuff, the things he said between the songs were not very interesting, or they weren't very funny. Unfortunately, I think Gene is just one of those guys who thinks he's a lot funnier than he is because he's constantly surrounded by super fans. And, you know, when you're in that spot, sometimes there's nobody to tell you it's not that funny. But whatever the case, I don't really remember a whole lot of what he was saying because, frankly, it wasn't that memorable. It just kind of rang a little hollow, rang a little lame. And this is why by the 10th song of the set, I had had enough and I thought I'd call it a night. But I want to be clear that this is not a negative review. I've definitely said some unflattering things about Gene, but the highlights of the show, specifically Deuce, Shout It Out Loud, Cold Gin, and I Love It Loud, were definitely highlights and were definitely fun. And I'm glad he was playing Summerfest. You know, him and Paul opened a restaurant in our casino here called Rockin' Brews. I've been there. Food's really good. Drinks are really good. So I hope Gene comes back again in the future, despite my critiques, despite my mild criticisms, despite the fact that it just wasn't an on night for me as a fan, maybe, or maybe it wasn't Gene's best night either on Friday, July 3rd. I would still go see him again if he comes back to town. So if he comes to your town, if you're a Kiss fan, I think I would recommend going to see him because the songs are all Kiss tracks. Like, he's not doing any solo work on this tour. I know from some of my friends who are Kiss mega fans, they lament that he's not going deeper into the catalog. So take that as you will. But from my perspective, I thought he was a little light on the hits. And I don't know if that's because he's not supposed to be singing Paul songs or he doesn't feel comfortable singing Paul songs, whatever that is. But I think the set list would have been improved if he did, because a couple of these songs that I didn't know didn't register very much with me. But that might just be me. So I'll just leave it at that. If you enjoyed this concert review, please check out the review I did of Kiss at Summerfest. That was a wholly positive experience for me. Not a mixed bag at all. I really had a good time at that one. And if you're a classic rock fan, please check out my other concert reviews, because I guarantee that I've covered a concert from a band or artist that you're a fan of. And if you are that fan of classic rock, please check out the podcast I do. It's all about classic rock. We've had a lot of great guests on this year already, and we have many more fun things coming up later down the road. So please stay tuned for that. Otherwise, please let me know in the comments if you've seen Gene on this tour or even at this show. Maybe you can tell me what I missed, Just be chill in the comments, please. But with that, I'll just say thank you very much for watching this video. If you're a Kiss fan, go see Gene if he comes to your town, and keep rocking.